Hi, I'm Anne and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be wrapping up the books that I read in December of 2021. However, I did want to make a couple announcements before we got in. First of all, let me say I got so many amazing Christmas presents this year. I got this beautiful, you can see it here, this Japanese cast iron teapot from my fiance. It is absolutely beautiful, and I'm currently drinking tea out of this little espresso cup that I got from the Goodwill like a couple of days ago, because I was like, I need some little teacups to go along with this gorgeous teapot. Since I'm wearing it, I also got this very warm, very comfortable and cozy scarf. My future mother-in-law got it for me, and it's just, I love it so much and I never want to take it off. Basically, both my fiance and I are living with our parents right now, so we don't have a lot of the home good items like kitchen items and things like that. The problem with that is if we move into an apartment, which we are planning to do soon when we get married, we don't have anything for like household items. We have things for like bedrooms, but that's about it. So I'm really excited to have a bunch of things now that I got for Christmas that are useful. I like practical gifts. I don't know. Books and practical gifts are the best. The other announcement I have to make is that I currently, as of when I'm recording this, though this may go up and down, if you have a BookTube channel, you know this, I currently just reached 500 subscribers on my YouTube channel, which my mind is blown. Thank you so much for anyone out there who has subscribed and been following along on my ramblings for the past year since I started my YouTube channel. So thank you. Also, I feel like this is typical. I see when booktubers reach 500 subscribers, they tend to do a Q&A, and I really want to do that. So next week, I'm going to be doing a Q&A for my YouTube channel. So if you have any questions for me, it doesn't have to be about books. It can be any questions about books. Just leave them in the comments down below and I'll be answering them next Saturday. I thought it might be fun to just do a Q&A, especially for you guys to get to know me maybe outside of books a little bit. So yeah, let me know what questions you are curious about for me to answer. So let's get into the books that I read in December. You know how last week I was like, there's no way I'm going to read like more than like 1 or 2 books this week. And there's no way I'm going to reach like 150 books and read 4 more books. Yes, I did reach 150 books. I read 4 books in 1 week, which is more than average for me, but also this month has been kind of slow. In total, I read a total of 11 books, which is not that much, but I also feel with the holidays and I had my finals for my college semester at the beginning of this month, I did pretty good on reading, especially since most of the books that I read this month, I really enjoyed. I have a couple 5-star reads, which is very rare for me. So let's get into the books that I read this month, and then we're going to get to my TBR for January, which is longer than usual. We're going to go from lowest to highest rating, and let's just get the one that I actually disliked out of the way. And that is Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. I love books that examine fairy tales but show like a darker side, so I was really interested to read this book, but I wasn't a big fan. I ended up giving it 2.5 stars. It is the first book in a series. I have not read any other of Stephanie Garber's books. The only reason I read this one was mainly because it was for my book club. And I had mixed feelings. It follows Evangeline, who is in love with this guy. It's in this, I would say, almost medieval setting. It feels very medieval, but there's also some technology stuff too, so it might be a little bit steampunk also, but it's definitely more traditional. But basically, she is in love with this guy and he's in love with her, and suddenly he just turns around and is engaged to her stepsister. And of course, her heart is broken and she goes to the Prince of Hearts, called Jax. That's his name, Jax. It's a strange name, but he is a strange dude. Basically, in this world, there are these fates who seem to be powerful beings. I would say almost equivalent to like Greek gods, because they have these special like godly abilities, but they still kind of live among people, but it's like separate from people. But they fulfill wishes, but they don't necessarily like fulfill them properly. So for example, Evangeline goes to Jax, and she's like, I wish that the wedding would be stopped between my stepsister and this guy I love. He's like, okay. So she goes home and she finds everyone has been turned to stone. And that's how he stopped the wedding. And she's like, whoa, 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 I don't want them to be turned to stone. So she ends up drinking poison and taking their place. So they go back to their regular lives and she is turned to stone. Months later, she is unturned from stone. She has become a hero because nobody knows that she made a deal with Jax to begin with. So she's considered to be a hero, and basically she ends up being sent as an emissary almost to this northern kingdom where there's this prince, and she ends up seeing Jax again, and he's like, well, in return for the wishes, we originally agreed that you would give me 3 kisses, like you would kiss 3 people that I tell you to. And so she kisses the prince of the north, and then he ends up magically falling in love with her, and it starts a whole lot of madness. So, the good things about this book, before I get into some of my criticisms, I enjoyed the world. I liked learning about like who the Fates were and what their powers were. I also enjoyed Evangeline to begin with. She's not the extremely selfish YA protagonist I'm so used to. Like, I really dislike a lot of YA protagonists, especially females, because they tend to be so self-centered around themselves. Like, they're so consumed by their own wishes. But I really enjoyed how in the beginning she is consumed by her own wishes, but then she realized, I made a really stupid decision. I'm going to like try to fix things, try to make things better, but she's caught in this situation. So I really enjoyed her character in the beginning. She makes some stupid decisions down the line, which are spoilers, but like I enjoyed that. The second thing I enjoyed was Jax. He's an interesting villain slash bad boy character. He's not good, but you can see some good sides of him. And he's an interesting character to learn about, especially since you don't ever know his motivations clearly. He's very much a mystery through the book. So I enjoyed like getting little snippets and understanding him more without like fully being shoved in our face. Yes, this is what the type of person he is, because you don't quite know what type of person he is. However, the things I didn't like about this book, every single male character is like young and hot and inexplicably attracted to Evangeline. Like, even this random guard that she meets early on is like attracted to her for like no reason, and he turns out to be something more later on. But it's just like every single guy character is like this hot bad boy character, and I'm like, you can chill. It's fine. You don't need to have this happen to like every male character, that it has to be like young, angsty teenager. No, you don't need that, okay? The next thing I really disliked is the ending. Here's the thing with series. I have no problem if you have a book end on more of a cliffhanger, as long as you conclude the overall plot of the first book in one story. So you should have an overall plot throughout the entire series, but you should have a smaller plot that is condensed into one book. And with this book, it didn't feel like that. It just felt like the plot stopped. And like, yes, if you read it together with the next books, it would make sense, but obviously the next book isn't out. So I felt like there's no reason for it to just like conclude like that without concluding any of the plot. And there are some plot points that are concluded, but others that aren't. So it didn't feel like enough of a conclusion to conclude a book. It did fall into teen tropes that I dislike. Like, there is a very strong love attraction between Evangeline and Jax, and I honestly didn't care at all for it. Like, I did not care that they were, like, she was attracted to him and she kept commenting on how hot he was. I was like, yes, he's a fascinating character, but hotness should not be his number one interesting quality, because he's a lot more complex than that. So I just like the whole like romance that was brought into it. It was just weird. So I ended up giving it 2.5 stars, which that is my least favorite book of the month, which says something that I liked a lot of the books that I read this month. The next book that I read is the Vogue sewing book. This was one of the books that I pulled out of my jar of books that I own that I want to read someday. I wasn't actually not a massive fan of this book. I actually unhauled it in my previous unhaul, and I will be getting rid of this copy. I have a couple other books which goes over the same stuff contained in this, and this focuses on 70s styles because that's when this book was written, and I really don't like 70s fashion. So it had some interesting information, but not enough for me to really love. So I actually gave it 2.5 stars as well. Same thing as Once Upon a Broken Heart. But it was interesting, but not great. Oh, all right. The next one I read was also for my book club, and I gave it 3 stars, and that is The Last Mrs. Parrish by Liv Constantine. This book was not at all what I was expecting, but it was interesting. It definitely had its imperfections, but I enjoyed it for the most part. Like, there were a lot of interesting elements. So basically, it follows this young woman, Amber, who decides to make friends with this wealthy woman and try to steal her husband. That is basically the first half of the book, is Amber wheedling her way into becoming friends with this wealthy woman and trying to just seduce her husband away from her, so because Amber believes that this woman doesn't deserve to have him. So the wife's name is Daphne Parrish, thus the last Mrs. Parrish, and like, Amber is a despicable human being. And I enjoyed seeing her plot and her mind of how messed up she was. But also it went on for a bit too long. The second half of the story is told from Daphne Parrish's perspective, and I enjoyed that more because there is a massive twist that comes halfway through the book, and I can't really reveal anything more, but I enjoyed the conclusion. But I think that, like, both Amber's section and Daphne's section did not need to be so long. We got the point of what was going on pretty early on in both of their sections. And then the middle of their sections just felt completely unnecessary. It goes a route I'm not used to in thrillers, and I enjoyed that. But it also wasn't enough to keep me hooked for the entire time. So I loved the beginning of each of their sections and the very end of the book when it all came to conclude. But the middles were just not perfect. For Christmas, obviously, I read a few, like, Christmas reads. The first one I read that I gave the lowest rating, it's still 3 stars, so it's not that bad, was the Christmas Bride by Anne Gracie. This is a novella, actually. It was free on Amazon, and I picked it up because it looked fun. I like clean Regency romances, usually. Like, they're very forgettable, but they're also just fun to read. Basically, this follows this guy, Blake Ash. Most people just call him Ash. His name is Blake Ashton. He is arriving home from the West Indies, I believe. He has been traveling for years and years. And he is coming home to England for Christmas. And he he is held up at gunpoint by this masked person who he then pulls out his own gun and shoots, and then he finds out that the masked person was a girl, and her name is Charlotte, and she and her younger brother have been living in this hovel, trying to hide from her family. And she needed food and money, and that's why she held him up, and of course they fall in love eventually, but I didn't actually like the romance. I didn't think it was that good, but I really loved Ash makes friends with her younger brother. And I really loved just their dynamic of, like, hanging out together. And they were just so cute together. And then all the other friends he has, who a lot of the other people, his friends, were in previous books of this series, but I haven't read them, so I didn't know any characters. But I just enjoyed, like, the Christmas feel and the friendships, but the romance, it just felt from nothing to 100, because for the first half of the book, she is mostly unconscious. Charlotte is shot in, I think, the shoulder. I'm pretty sure she was shot in the shoulder. So she is feverish. She's not awake. So you don't really learn much about her. And then the second half just kind of shoves all the romance in there. But the problem is, because this book is only like 125 pages, because of that, you only have like 70 pages or something like that, or 60 pages to actually get some of the romance and build their relationship, and it wasn't enough time. So it was a cute story, but yeah, I want a little bit more. All right, the next one, I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 3.75 stars, and that is Christmas in Peachtree, Bluff by Christy Woodson Harvey. Basically, this is a family story. It deals with a basically a mother and her 3 daughters, some of which have their own children, some of which are married, some of which are not. And it is set in this little tiny coastal town in the South somewhere. I don't know. I don't remember which southern state it is set in, but it has to do with a hurricane. That's a big plot point. But I really loved this book. It was really cute and fun. And yes, it had its imperfections. Some of the plot points were like, really? One of the granddaughters of the main woman is a teenager, Vivi, and she's just an absolute horrible human being. Like, they try to justify her later on, but I just disliked her from start to finish. But I enjoyed the story. It's a cute Christmas story, but it also had a lot of setup from the first 3 books of the series, because this is the 4th book of the series. I didn't know that when I got it, but I still enjoyed it on its own, but I think I would have understood it better if I had read the previous installments. But it has to do with romance and Christmas, and I don't know, it's very cutesy and light and more like a family cozy story, with that very southern feel to it. So it was fun. I enjoyed it. The next book I just finished recently, and that is The Day Christ Was Born by Jim Bishop. Jim Bishop also wrote The Day Christ Died, which is probably one of his more popular works, more popular than this one. It is only like 100 pages. This book tries to examine both biblical and historical evidence and to like put together the story of Jesus Christ's birth, so what Christmas is based on. This was an interesting book because it has quite a lot of like historical details of the era. For example, it talks about Jewish marriage traditions, and it also has a lot of biblical text in there. However, it is written in almost a narrative format, so it's very much a feel of a fictional story. And yes, there are like nonfiction backgrounds of it, but like there's dialogue and there's thoughts of the characters, or their thoughts of Mary and Joseph, and obviously we didn't know any of their thoughts. So it's part fiction, part historical, but it's a really cute book. I ended up giving this 3.75 stars. The next one is Christmas romance. I read a few Christmas romances. Pretty sure this is the last one though. And that is I'm Glad I Found You This Christmas by C.P. Ward. Basically, this is about this woman, Maggie, who she's in a distant relationship with her boyfriend. Like, he's kind of checked out of the relationship, so she decides to book this vacation to this mysterious winter village in Scotland. And she goes up there alone because her boyfriend's like, oh yeah, I'll come join you. And she's really hoping he'll propose. And of course, when she's there, she realizes like how magical the town is. It's pretty much like the North Pole. And it's like snowing all the time, and everyone is super into a holiday cheer, and it's very magical. So the book has perfect Christmas vibes. And of course, when she's there, she meets this one guy who is a veterinarian. He takes care of the reindeer in town. Yes, there are reindeer in town. It was a cute book. It was a cute, nice book. This was a free one that I got on Kindle as well. I rarely actually buy books from Kindle. Usually I just get like the free indie books, but it is a really cute, light Christmas story, and it has these perfect feel of like Christmas vibes because she's on vacation. She's doing Christmassy stuff like dog sledding and making marshmallows, and I just really enjoyed this book. I ended up giving this 4.25 stars, which is a lot higher than usually I give a lot of romances. I will say the reason I didn't give this 5 stars is that the main love interest, Henry, the vet who takes care of reindeer, he wasn't that developed. He has base developed, but he was kind of just too perfect. And I was like, you're hiding something because you're too perfect. But yeah, he was just perfect, and that didn't really make sense to me, but it's a ridiculous Christmas romance. What do you expect? Reality? You do know that I was supposed to finish this book this month. We'll get to that in a minute. But instead I decided to pick up Bleak House. And I read the entire thing this month. Yes, I read the entire 800 pages of Bleak House. I have no regrets. So it's hard to describe this book because it's part mystery, but also part family drama. It's set in, I would say, the 1850s. It follows Esther, who is this orphan who is taken in by this wealthy man along with two other of his actual relations, Ada and Richard. So all three of them are like best friends in the book. And Esther's background, her origin is not known, and we kind of piece together things as the plot goes along. There's also this mysterious death of this guy that is found dead in his apartment, and this little boy, and there's also this court case, Jaundice versus Jaundice. I think that's what it's called. But basically, there's a lot going on in this book. But it mostly, I would say, centers around Esther. And that's why I would say arguably she is the main character. Personally, there's this like inspector. I can't remember his name right now. He was my favorite character. I absolutely loved him. He's doing a lot of the investigating. And yeah, I just really enjoyed his character. So this was a good book. I definitely preferred other of Charles Dickens' books. My favorite one will always be Little Dorrit. I have a soft spot for that one. But I might enjoy like Oliver Twist and The Tale of Two Cities and The Christmas Carol and things like that more than this one. But for being this long, it does keep you interested for the entire length. I actually was listening to this while I was finishing sewing my wedding dress and my wedding veil. So a lot of people have argued that this is his best book, and I honestly have to say I don't think so, but then I haven't read enough of his other works to say for sure. But I just personally prefer other of his books better, but it is a good book and I really loved this copy. The next book I talked about in my top books that I read this year, and that is Once Upon a Wardrobe by Patty Callahan. Basically, this is about a young girl, young woman, she's in college, whose brother is very sickly and dying, but he loves the Chronicles of Narnia, the first book, I should say, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So he wants to know where the idea for Narnia came from. So his sister, the main character, she goes to meet C.S. Lewis. And so she goes to C.S. Lewis and his brother who live together. And she's like, where did you get this idea for Narnia? And instead he starts telling her stories of his childhood, and she relays those stories to her brother. And the story is just like a very heartfelt but bittersweet book. I really enjoyed this. I gave this a full 5 stars. The next book that I read was actually a reread. I've talked about how like I used to reread this book every single Christmas, but I haven't read it in the last couple years, but I read The Christmas Carol. This is actually a collection I have of The Chimes and The Cricket on the Hearth and The Christmas Carol, so it has like 3 stories in one. But I love rereading The Christmas Carol for Christmas. It's so much fun, and which means I read actually 2 books by Charles Dickens this month, but I listened to this on audiobook. It's my first time listening to The Christmas Carol on audiobook. Usually I just read it. And the final book that I read this month is The Red Scarf Girl by Jiang Jili. So this was a young woman who was born actually a year before my mother. She was born in 1954, and she survived Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution in the 1960s. So it's a fascinating book. I hauled this book maybe like a month or 2 ago, and it's a nonfiction memoir, but it is very young because most of the book takes place between when Jili is 12 to 14, something like that, and she's a very smart child, and she tries her best to succeed, but she is completely brainwashed into the Mao Zedong like Cultural Revolution. And it's fascinating to look at how twisted a completely good and ordinary person's mind can be by brainwashing. And it's creepy because I was reading this and I'm like, this is relevant to the modern day so much, and I won't get into politics, but it was a really interesting read and very sad, but it does have a happy ending because all her family survives this because her father at one point is thrown into prison and they're not sure if he's ever going to come out. So it's an exceptional book and it's very simply written. So I gave this 5 stars because I really loved this. those are all the books that I finished this month. However, I do have to mention the other book that I drew out of books that I own the last month was The Mandarin by Robert Elegant. I ended up DNFing this book. Here's why. So I got 50 pages in before I gave up. And I'm not going to go into the details of the plot so much, but basically it follows these two families in China during the 1850s. And one is a Jewish family and the other one is a Chinese family. Basically, that's the plot. But I wasn't really into the story so much. It felt very distant from actual Chinese culture and very much into like the foreign Chinese culture. Think of like Shanghai and like foreign influence, which there's nothing wrong about writing about that, but it felt very posh and distant, and I don't know. I couldn't connect to it. And the thing that actually made me put this down and just stop was for an entire chapter, the Jewish family has a daughter, and for the entire chapter, it was just going over her changing her clothes, really focusing sexually on her. And yes, she is an adult, but I don't want that. I don't want to like read that stuff. Like, it's creepy. This is like a journalist who's writing about this young girl like changing clothes in detail, and it was just awkward. No, it just creeped me out. So that's why I DNF'd it. Also, sources of Chinese tradition. I am currently almost halfway done with this book, so I will finish this next month. I promise. I keep saying I'll read it. Like, I literally could have read this in the time it took me to finish Bleak House, but because I was able to listen to Bleak House on audiobook, that's why I was able to finish it, whereas this one I have to read it, and it's pretty dense, so I don't want to, like, skim it, but I did get halfway through. I have a bigger TBR next month, partially because of this, because this is the first book I want to finish in January, is this book. I will finish it. All right. Also, I was invited by Lady Jane Books to do a buddy read with her. I've never done a buddy read with a booktuber, so this is going to be really fun. We are reading The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V. Schwab. I have not started this book yet, but I will on the 1st of January. I'm pre-filming this, so I'm sure by the time you're watching this, I've probably already started it, but I'm really excited to read this book because it's been on my TBR for a long time. In fact, I've been wanting to read more of V. Schwab's books. The next two books for my book club that I need to read are Something in the Water by Catherine Steadman, which is a thriller, which according to my book club, those who have read it, a lot of people haven't enjoyed it, so we'll see. And then the other one is The Dirty Book Club by Lisa Harrison, which by the title, I'm a little bit concerned about it. But we'll see what it is. All right, and then I need to pull two books out of this for next month, and I'm terrified because I hope I don't get a big book. All right. Ooh. Okay, so the first one is 6 Questions of Socrates by Christopher Phillips. This, I believe, is a nonfiction which looks at Socrates but from a modern lens, so tries to implement Socrates' philosophy into the modern world. I got it from the Goodwill years ago. Actually, this is a good one to read because I have been wanting to read this because I've had it on my shelf for years and I just have never read it. So yeah, and I love reading about Socrates, so yeah. Excited about that, actually. That's going to be not that hard to read. And then the other one... Oh! The other one is Dorothy L. Sayers' A Careless Rage for Life by David Combs? I'm not sure, but I have loved Dorothy L. Sayers' mysteries. This is actually another good choice because this will not be that hard to read. It's a pretty light biography. And yeah, I'm excited about all the books I'm reading in January. Well, I should say almost all the books. I don't know. I haven't been enjoying a lot of the books from my book club recently. And there are all the books I read in December. Have you read any of these books or the books on my TBR? I'm curious to see what your thoughts were about them. And also remember to let me know your questions for my Q&A next week down in the comment box. Comment box? What the hell is a comment box? I need to go to bed. And thank you for 500 subscribers. I have been enjoying BookTube so much more than I thought I would. So much more than blogging. I had a blogging website for about 4 years before getting on YouTube, and I've been enjoying filming videos and reacting to other booktubers videos so much more than I enjoyed like blogging. So yeah, I don't think blogging is as much for me as just like talking. So thank you so much for watching. Happy New Year. I hope your year of 2022 is good. If you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe. I post every Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you all in the next video. Have a great week. Bye.